Remember to give the video a thumbs up, share your insights in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. A surprising act from my neighbor prompted a deep reflection within me. What transpired will leave you in disbelief. As the clock struck 6 in the evening, a soft knock at my door drew my attention. A knock that finds equilibrium, neither forceful nor too languid, carrying a hint of uncertainty in its assurance. Certainly, that is the phrase. Uncertain, it felt as though the figure on the opposite side flickered, uncertain of their true position in that instant. At the kitchen sink, I rinsed the last remnants of the dinner dishes, the warm aroma of roasted rosemary chicken lingering in the air, a soothing reminder of the meal we had just enjoyed together. The sky outside my window was draped in a rare fusion of orange and purple, a spectacle that only the sunsets of early spring could conjure. The atmosphere was tranquil, not unexpected. The echo of that knock transformed everything. I wiped my hands on the towel that hung gracefully by the stove, adjusting my cardigan. With a soft caress, I approached the front door. My expression was a canvas of astonishment. I was unprepared for the unexpected arrival of anyone. I genuinely never did. In the years that ensued after Michael's departure, existence had adopted a more languid rhythm. The days had unfolded into a tranquil rhythm, defined by the tender joys of tending to the garden, the comfort of losing oneself in a book, and the beloved tradition of sharing coffee each week with Brenda from the neighborhood book club. As I pushed the door ajar, there he was, Ethan, my neighbor from next door. We exchanged ephemeral smiles across. We exchanged fleeting words as we attended to the trash bins and pulled weeds along the borders of our properties, the fences standing as silent witnesses to our interactions. He was a few years younger than I, likely in his late 40s or early 50s. After experiencing a divorce, I found myself having settled into a new rhythm about 2 years ago, marked by a gentle demeanor, soft-spoken words, and a touch of introspection. That evening, he seemed restless, his fingers clutching a small basket wrapped in a linen cloth. "Hello, Olivia," he said, his voice carrying a hint of gravel, as though he had just cleared his throat several times before approaching. "I apologize for the sudden visit, but I found myself with an abundance of scones and thought you might enjoy a few." I blinked. Scones? It was an unexpected conclusion, one I could never have foreseen. My heart fluttered, not from excitement, but from a mix of confusion and curiosity. A gentleman offered me freshly baked treats as the sun sank below the horizon. Such a moment had not graced my life since my college days. I smiled, perhaps a touch too widely. "Your kindness is truly appreciated, Ethan. I would greatly appreciate some. Would you care to step inside? If you find yourself with a moment to spare, I have some tea to share." He paused for a fleeting moment, just long enough to stir doubts within me about whether I had overstepped my bounds. He then offered a nod. "Tea seems delightful." We lingered in the sunroom where the final rays of daylight poured through the windows, enveloping the space in a warm golden glow. I poured chamomile into the porcelain cup, the very vessel I once cradled during those brisk evenings. It held an unusual warmth, a fusion of familiarity and novelty. Ethan, a man of few words, mirrored my own recent inclination towards silence, yet the stillness that surrounded us was far from uncomfortable. It exuded a sense of warmth and intimacy, as if we were engaging in a silent dialogue that surpassed the limitations of speech. He revealed that he had recently embraced baking as a pastime, noting how it calmed his thoughts after endless days unfolded in the confines of his home office. Each word he uttered held me in thrall, and I couldn't help but notice the slight crease in his brow as he recounted tales of his teenage daughter, who lived mostly with her mother. "I miss her," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Isn't it strange? You cultivate their essence, invest your soul in their development, and then, in an ephemeral instant, they metamorphose into a beloved partner for another." I nodded in assent. I understood far more than he could ever comprehend. the profound emptiness that remains as children set forth on their own paths, carrying with them the resonances of their earlier days. It's hardly surprising, I observed quietly. It embodies the very core of being a parent. It seems to me that the most formidable challenge lies in letting go. In that ephemeral moment, our eyes met, if only for a heartbeat, and I glimpsed something, perhaps recognition, a collective grief concealed beneath the armor of strength and the unyielding quest for endurance. As he took his leave an hour later, having savored 3 scones and 2 cups of tea, a long-dormant sensation began to stir within me. A soft warmth unfurls in my chest, a fleeting spark. That evening, as I settled into bed, the basket he had brought sat on the counter, one solitary scone remaining inside. I stared at the ceiling, contemplating if it was simply kindness or if there was a more profound force at work. I calmed my thoughts to prevent myself from delving too deeply into the circumstances. At the age of 55, I discovered my true self. He was simply offering a gesture of goodwill. That encompassed it all. However, a gentle whisper emerged from the recesses of my mind, unveiling a truth I had kept hidden for far too long. It is entirely appropriate to welcome your emotions again. After what felt like an eternity, I permitted that voice to resonate within me rather than dismissing it hastily. 3 days had passed before I crossed paths with Ethan again. I had convinced myself that the tea and scones were nothing more than a transient pleasure, a momentary yet meaningful gesture of kindness shared among neighbors. Yet every time I strolled past the sunroom or glimpsed a fleeting view of his house ignited a soft, unfamiliar flutter in my chest. I reproached myself for my folly, so naive. Still, I found myself straining to catch the faintest sound of footsteps beyond the door, pausing for a moment longer as I styled my hair in the mirror. Finally, the long-awaited Saturday has come. The day unfolded with a surprising warmth, hinting at the summer that lay ahead. As I cared for the lavender bushes that adorned the fence, the morning air was infused with the fragrance of blossoms when a voice unexpectedly interrupted the tranquility. "Do you require assistance?" I turned, and there he was. Ethan positioned himself at the edge of his yard, sleeves rolled up, a shovel firmly held in one hand, a mischievous grin playing upon his lips. "Your garden is a masterpiece in its own right. Each bloom tells a story, and I can see the effort you pour into it." As I admire the lively splashes of color that grace my path, I realize I am still in the early stages, digging through the earth, holding onto the slightest flicker of optimism for something extraordinary to emerge. A laugh escaped me as I wiped the perspiration from my brow, the back of my glove against my forehead. Out here, miracles and mulch blend seamlessly. He released a soft chuckle, leaning the shovel against the fence with a relaxed nonchalance. My thoughts drifted elsewhere. "Would you care to join me for dinner this evening?" "Nothing extravagant, just a dish I'm putting together." I would cherish the company. I remained motionless, enveloped in a moment of pure disbelief. For a brief moment, I wondered if I had genuinely heard him, or if it was simply a figment of my imagination. Yet his gaze was sincere, wavering, yet receptive. An evening meal shared with a gentleman in his abode. It had been, my word, more than 10 years since I found myself in such a predicament. This time, my smile unfolded more gradually. I would absolutely cherish that. Ethan's house mirrored his essence perfectly, orderly and modest, adorned with subtle personal details that hinted at depths he may not have fully acknowledged. Along the hallway, framed photos of his daughter adorned the walls, while a bookshelf brimming with travel guides held a prominent position in the living room. Candles were arranged meticulously on the table. Just 2, nothing extravagant, and a lasagna filled the air with an aroma that instantly evoked a sense of belonging. As we dined, the conversation flowed with newfound ease. We delved into our histories, exploring not merely the events, but the nuances that lingered in the silence between them. "I once envisioned my retirement in Italy," he remarked, a nostalgic smile gracing his lips, "where I would open a quaint cafe by the water." Yet fate had a different course in mind. I inclined my head in agreement. Michael and I envisioned a journey across the country in an RV. We had even selected the model. Then his heart faltered far too early. The words flowed from me with an ease I hadn't anticipated. Typically, I steered clear of discussions regarding Michael. It resonated with the sting of betrayal. Yet with Ethan, it was different. He maintained his gaze, resisting the temptation of trite expressions. He simply absorbed every word. Following our meal, we transitioned to the rear porch. The sky had transformed into a gentle velvet with stars starting to emerge from their slumber. The silence enveloped the scene once more, infused with the gentle hum of cicadas and the faint tinkling of wind chimes drifting from a nearby yard. "I'm glad you came," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. It has been ages since this house resonated with anything beyond the mere function of a resting place. I looked at him, then truly looked. The gentle lines that framed his eyes, the way his hands rested on the arms of the chair, steady and resolute. Then, once again, he performed an act that left me in awe. He reached out his hand toward mine. He neither clutched it nor pulled it nearer. His fingers merely brushed against mine, a quiet invitation. In that fleeting moment, uncertainty washed over me, not from a lack of longing, but because the feeling of such delicate touch had faded from my recollection. It was devoid of urgency, instead emanating a warmth and reverence, a bond that expressed a profound understanding, an invitation to explore the depths of each other's being. I let my fingers intertwine with his. We remained in that instant, hands suspended between us, two spirits linked by a silent comprehension, something unmistakably real. As I walked home under the twinkling stars, my heartbeat settled into a serene cadence, no longer quickened by anxiety or uncertainty, but rather resonating with an unfamiliar sense. Serenity enveloped me, a steadiness I had yearned for. That evening, I found myself by the window, pen poised in hand, as I crafted a single sentence in my journal for the first time in years. A stirring was awakening within me once more. Uncertainty cast its shadow over the path ahead, leaving me shrouded in darkness regarding its destination. Yet, I was acutely aware of this. It had transcended the simple idea of a neighbor. It revolved around potential, around rediscovering a part of myself I thought had faded away with the passage of time. For the first time, a sense of curiosity about tomorrow stirred within me for ages. Nearly a fortnight had passed since that night on Ethan's porch, since that soft caress, since I allowed someone to breach my defenses, if only slightly. In the stillness that ensued, existence embraced a new cadence. Nuanced changes, delicate movements. As I tended to the garden, Ethan's hand emerged from the kitchen window, a friendly wave cutting through the afternoon air. One morning, he placed a warm loaf of bread at my doorstep, accompanied by a sticky note that carried the inscription, "Still practicing. Please let me know if my progress is noticeable." It was devoid of the grandiosity or sweeping drama often found in the pages of novels, yet it possessed a deep authenticity. One afternoon, after a light rain had left the sidewalks glistening and filled the air with the fragrance of wet earth and lilacs, he called out. "Hey," he said. "I know this is a bit sudden, but I could really use a walk. Would you like some company?" I moved swiftly, without a second thought. "I will go and get my jacket." At the intersection of our street, we found ourselves beneath the sprawling branches of ancient oak trees that loomed overhead, resembling vigilant sentinels. The clouds began to fragment, permitting slender beams of sunlight to descend and caress the pavement below. Every sensation was infused with a sense of renewal. We strolled along, not out of caution, but because neither of us felt the urgency to arrive anywhere. On that day, an intangible essence lingered in the atmosphere, with a subtle vibrancy that infused life into every moment. Initially, our conversation revolved around the minutiae of life, his job, and my recent endeavor to breathe new life into the tomato plants. As we ventured onto the path winding through the neighborhood park, our dialogue effortlessly deepened. This trail was once a path we walked together, Ethan murmured gently. My daughter. In her childhood, she found joy in gathering stones, weaving tales of their enchantment. Once she handed me one and assured me it would shield me from the burdens of maturity. He smiled, but the warmth never reached his gaze. Do you still have it? I inquired softly. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. The uppermost compartment of my bedside table. Whenever the thought of discarding it crosses my mind, I find myself unable to do so. I hesitated for a moment, then extended my hand to grasp his once more, reminiscent of that evening spent on the porch. This time, there was an unwavering resolve. I believe it continues to function, I remarked. He halted his steps, standing there beneath the blooming dogwood tree, and gazed at me in a manner that left me momentarily breathless. Olivia, I never imagined I could experience these feelings once more. I was taken by surprise. We have both traversed the intricate tapestry of life. A smile graced my lips. We have known both possession and defeat. Perhaps that is precisely why this moment carries such weight. He nodded with deliberation, then delved into his coat pocket and retrieved an object, a diminutive polished stone scarcely larger than a walnut. He rotated it in his grasp before gently placing it into my palm. You require protection as well, he remarked. My throat constricted. I had never encountered such tenderness before, not any longer. Yet, in that fleeting moment, a truth emerged that I had long been hesitant to acknowledge within myself. Trust was slowly beginning to weave its way back into my heart. We continued our stroll, fingers intertwined, the stone radiating warmth in my hand. As we walked along, we encountered children riding their bicycles, couples pushing strollers, and the invigorating aroma of fresh grass mingling with the earthy scent of damp leaves enveloping us. And somewhere along that meandering journey, it struck me that I wasn't merely allowing someone to enter my life. I was making my exit, allowing myself to laugh freely, to be visible without embarrassment, to hope boldly without trepidation. As we arrived at the trail's conclusion, the sun hung low in the sky, its light stretching into elongated shadows that danced across the pavement. I don't want to say goodnight just yet, he murmured. I glanced at him, a smile gracing my lips. In that case, refrain from doing so. He inhaled deeply and moved nearer, his gaze probing mine, unhurried, unassertive, merely posing a question without words. I inclined my head in agreement. For the first time in what seemed like a distant past, I experienced the gentle, hesitant touch of lips meeting my own. Not a spectacle of fireworks, not a grand cinematic explosion. Yet there was warmth, was merely my perception that had shifted, unveiling layers of meaning previously obscured. The promise of what could be lingered in the air, a gentle whisper urging me to embrace the unknown. That night, I chose silence over words, trusting the unfolding narrative to reveal itself in due time. I sensed a depth within me awakening, unburdened by trepidation. The morning light, casting its glow upon familiar surroundings, rendered them extraordinary, each moment imbued with a richness that had eluded me before. Yet, the essence of the world remained unchanged, was the perspective I held. I found myself lingering at the window, savoring my coffee as I watched the early light gently stretch across my backyard. My shoulders seemed to lift slightly, the air wrapped around me with a warmth that defied the cloudy forecast. A transformation had taken place within me. Perhaps that is the outcome when you begin to allow yourself to experience emotions once more. It encompasses not only the delight but also the peril that accompanies it, the uncertainty, the potential. Later that afternoon, Ethan called, his voice softer than usual. May I come by? I nodded before he could finish. He stepped inside, holding 2 coffees, his smile edged with a trace of anxiety. I hope this doesn't feel too fast, he said, extending the cup toward me. Just last night, my thoughts had been occupied, refusing to dissipate. I gestured toward the chair opposite me in the sunroom, inviting him to sit. I couldn't either. We remained in that moment, drinks in hand, letting the silence express what words could never convey. He turned his gaze toward me, truly observing. "You frightened me just a bit, Olivia," he confessed. I arched an eyebrow, a chuckle escaping my lips. "Myself." He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "This resonates with authenticity. For an extended period, I have refrained from allowing anything to truly touch me. I understood it more profoundly than I could express. I had built my life around the gentle rhythms of quiet routines, secure boundaries, and the solace of monotonous days. It was a life that required little from me, yet yielded scant rewards, comfortably sufficient. Ethan represented something more profound. I confessed, my own apprehension reflecting theirs. "Perhaps this is a favorable result." He smiled, and the unease in his eyes started to dissipate. The rest of the afternoon was spent in dialogue about the unvoiced musings that seldom emerged into the daylight. The lingering sorrow, shifting its shape as time progresses, the dimensions of years, we kept hidden the essence of our being, burying our dreams so deeply that we forgot they were still alive. Slowly, a vision began to take shape, not a love story painted in bright, striking colors, but one softly sketched in gentle, understated shades. It was not about second chances, but rather about new beginnings. That weekend, we found ourselves at the farmer's market, walking together. It seemed ordinary, yet it held a unique, serene beauty. The scent of freshly picked peaches, the warmth of baked bread, and the delightful sounds of laughter filled the air, drifting through the open air. Yet it seemed, indeed, the sort of ordinary that transforms into memory. As spring gracefully transitioned into summer, our lives began to intertwine in subtle yet significant ways. Breakfast on a Sunday morning, collaborative crossword puzzles. A mysterious book appeared on my porch, accompanied by a note. "I believe this will resonate with you." We took our time. There was no necessity for it. Affection, genuine affection. It doesn't always arrive with flashes of brilliance or grand pronouncements. At times, it arrives with a deliberate, measured pace, a fleeting look exchanged over the dinner table in the comforting knowledge that someone awaits you at the door after a long and arduous day. One evening, as we lingered on my porch, observing the fireflies twirl amidst the tall grass, he took my hand once more. In that moment, both of us moved forward without a trace of doubt. "I believe we crossed paths at just the right moment," he said, and I smiled softly. Resting my head against his shoulder, I felt a firm resolve. It appeared we had converged at a time when we were genuinely ready. He nodded, and the night wrapped around us like a soft cocoon. Not everything had shifted. The world outside persisted in its unyielding rotation, unchanged. The garden still needed the gentle care of weeding. The clock's hands pressed on, unrelenting. Yet within me, a door had flung open, and I sensed profoundly that this chapter of my life was as significant as any that had come before. It may have signaled the beginning of the most authentic chapter thus far. A chapter built not on the pillars of youth, timing, or perfection. In the landscape of understanding, courage emerges as the subtle force that drives us onward, a loyal ally amid the unknown. It speaks softly in our moments of uncertainty, encouraging us to venture into the unfamiliar. It is not the lack of fear, but the determination to transcend it, to welcome the obstacles that await. Within the fabric of existence, courage intertwines its strands of resilience and hope, a gentle reminder that even the smallest acts can spark the flames of change. It is a journey, not merely a destination. Each courageous choice we make contributes to the legacy of our spirit. In the tranquil enchantment of two souls who have navigated life's trials, they have come to grasp the essence of what truly matters. Therefore, to all who are willing to listen, I extend these words. Continue to strive for connection. Do not close the door on an opportunity simply because it arrives later than expected. At times, an unexpected event can ignite its beginning.